let's talk about projections, specifically the projections for the 2020 New York Mets. Fangraphs has them projected at 88 and 74 this season, as does the PECOTA projections from Baseball Prospectus, and Clay Davenport has them projected even higher at 92 and 70 as of February 25th. In each of these projections, the Mets finish first in the NL East and are the second best team in the National League behind the absolutely loaded Dodgers. But why? Why is the team that finished third in their division last season projected to leapfrog the Braves and world champion Nationals in the standings? Let's find out. My name is Bobby, and welcome back to Stat Stories. Shout out to whoever suggested this topic. I couldn't find your comment anywhere, but just know that I appreciate you. So let's start with how these projections work. While each system has its own methodology, the basic ideas are universal. They look at how a player has performed over the past handful of seasons and give more weight to recent performance. They also look at how similar players have performed historically. This helps create an aging curve for a player, which is particularly useful for young players with little MLB experience and those who are in the late stages of their career. So what about the stats these projections are looking at? Again, it varies by system, but they like to focus on what batters and pitchers have more control over. These include stats like walk percentage, strikeout percentage, home run rate, exit velocity, launch angle, barrel percentage, and defense-independent pitching stats such as FIP and xFIP. Don't worry if you're unfamiliar with some of these, as I'll explain them when they come up. Let's look at some offensive players first, starting with Robinson Cano. Going into his age 37 season, it would be normal to expect his performance to decline with age. His walk rate just under 6% was his lowest since 2011, and a strikeout rate above 16% is the highest for his career, though it's still better than league average. He also posted some of the lowest marks of his career in the slash line categories of batting average, on-base percentage, and slugging percentage. The thing is, he still hit the ball hard. His average exit velocity, which is the speed of the ball as it leaves the bat, was 90.8 miles per hour, and his hard hit rate was 46%, with a hard hit being defined as any ball hit at least 95 miles per hour. Both of these marks are among the top 20% of big leaguers, and StatCast factors in the solid contact when calculating expected stats, giving Cano an expected batting average of 280, expected weighted on base average of 328, and expected slugging of 450. If you're unfamiliar with weighted on base average, it's basically a better version of on base percentage and is on the same scale. So Cano wasn't as bad as he seemed in 2019, as this slash line was very similar to his 2017 line, a season where he is worth 3.1 wins above replacement. Next, I want to bring up JD Davis, who had a nice little breakout season in 2019. He hit 22 home runs in 410 at-bats, which breaks down to 1 every 18.6 at-bats. His weighted runs created plus was 136, or 36% better than the league average offensive player, and he hit the ball hard. And I mean top 10% in the league kind of hard. I mainly wanted to bring him up to show that his offensive ability was for real, and if the NL winds up adopting the designated hitter, the Mets have a prime candidate for that role. I also want to mention Brandon Nimmo as one to watch as he comes back from a neck injury that caused him to miss significant time in 2019. Even if he doesn't reach the same heights as he did in 2018, he's still an on-base machine with very good speed. We move on to the Mets pitching staff now, and the only rotation member I want to talk about is Noah Syndergaard. A 4.28 ERA from a guy who has consistently been in the low 3s or high 2s in that stat looks concerning at first glance. But if we look at his strikeout and walk rates from 2018 and 19, they are almost identical. The difference was an increased home run per fly ball rate and a lower left on base percentage. Basically, Syndergaard allowed more homers, and there happened to be more runners on base when they were hit. While there is some degree of bad luck in that happening, we have to acknowledge the batted ball data. His exit velocity and hard hit rate were still good and in line with his career norms, but his launch angle was noticeably higher. This was the case all over the league as batters try to elevate the ball more often. Syndergaard throws very hard, so he was negatively affected by this. We also have to acknowledge the effect of juice baseballs last season. We can't say for certain how much it affected Syndergaard's performance, but for a guy whose only major difference in performance was home runs, you have to think it played a big role. If home runs subside a bit in 2020, and if Syndergaard can induce more ground balls to combat the effect of launch angle, he should look more like the star pitcher the Mets expect him to be. Our last stop is the Mets bullpen. one of their biggest weaknesses in 2019 is projected to be one of their greatest strengths in 2020. Quickly going through a couple of their relievers, we have Seth Lugo, whose stellar 2019 season was no fluke. Lots of strikeouts, few walks, and he was among the cream of the crop at limiting quality contact. Lefty Justin Wilson only threw 39 innings in 2019, but he did pretty well, and his 83.8 miles per hour average exit velocity was the second lowest in the majors among those with at least 100 batted balls. We also can't leave out Dellin Betances, who is coming back from an injury-filled 2019 season. I think people forget just how good he was the year prior, since he didn't make the All-Star team for the first time. But he had the best strikeout rate of his career and allowed just 20 earned runs in 66.2 innings. And most of those runs were allowed at the beginning and end of the season. I know I'm cherry-picking a bit here, but in a 3-month stretch from the end of May to end of August, he allowed just 2 earned runs. His performance this season will be key if the Mets bullpen is to turn things around. But there is one last reliever we need to mention: Edwin Diaz. He was probably the biggest disappointment on the Mets, considering how well he performed for the Mariners in 2018 and how bad he was in 2019. But there's reason to believe he'll be much better in 2020. Here's his ERA, FIP, and xFIP from last year. FIP, or fielding independent pitching, is on the same scale as ERA, and removes defense and luck on balls in play from the equation, focusing instead on what pitchers have more control over, such as strikeouts, walks, and homers. xFIP, or expected fielding independent pitching, takes things a step further and gives every pitcher the same home run per fly ball rate. While these three don't always equal each other in the long run, they'll at least be closer than what we see with Diaz. His batting average on balls in play and home run per fly ball rate were both absurdly high, but his strikeout rate was still among the league's best. And when we consider the quality of contact Diaz gave up, he had the worst luck in the majors. Even with all this in mind, he wouldn't have replicated his 2018 season, but an ERA closer to 3 seems more reasonable for a player of his caliber. So after going through all these players, we can see the Mets have some talented guys who should have been better than what we saw in 2019. Every team has players like this, but in the Mets' case, the difference between expectations and reality is pretty drastic. Even if players like Diaz, Cano, and Syndergaard can have the type of years the underlying metrics suggest they should have, we have to keep 2 things in mind. These are still just projections, and these are still the Mets. So check out the comment I've pinned below for a little channel update. Leave a like and share the video if you enjoyed it, and remember to click subscribe to help the channel grow and reach more people. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.